Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 10th of July of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory Ukraine, and we will begin with the Ukrainian massive attack through the southern regions of the Russian Federation. According to information we have, the Ukrainians launched hundreds of drones deep inside of the territory of Russia. One group of drones was moving in the northern direction with the purpose to attack the city of Moscow, the capital of the Russian Federation, but it seems that due to the fact that we haven't received anything on this matter about this massive attack, we believe that the Russians managed to repel these drones and to force the Ukrainians to change their plans. Another attack took place in the direction of the southern regions of Russia, and lots of explosions were recorded through this triangle. The Ukrainians were attacking objects of military infrastructure, the Ukrainians were attacking different fuel facilities, and the Ukrainians were attacking vessels. I would like to remind you that yesterday the NATO countries, the NATO organization, was conducting two reconnaissance operations. The first one took place through the Black Sea, and the NATO surveillance aircraft was flying through the eastern parts of the Black Sea. Most likely the NATO countries were gathering the information about the situation in this triangle. The NATO countries were planning to, or trying to get targets. The second reconnaissance operation was taking place in the area of the Gulf of Finland, but as we can see, this reconnaissance operation was something like an attempt to distract the Russia's attention. As we can see, according to numbers, according to videos and updates we received during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians chose the southern direction for a massive attack. But another important thing is that we start receiving reports that the NATO began reconnaissance operation right now through the western parts of the Black Sea, and most likely the reconnaissance aircrafts are trying to gather the surveillance reconnaissance information about the Crimea. So most likely in coming 24 hours, the Ukrainians may try to attack Crimea. But another important thing, that maybe the Russians managed to ruin Ukraine's plans, because right before we started making this video, we start receiving reports that the Russians began attacking the Odesa region. Maybe the Russians managed to discover the launching sites of drones and the Russians destroyed them. So anyway, we will understand this in coming hours. So let's return back to Ukraine's massive attack. The Ukrainians used hundreds of drones to attack this triangle, and there are three important points that were attacked by the Ukrainians. And the first one, and the most important one, is the area of the Sea of Azov, and today is the fourth day when the Ukrainians continue attacking the territory of Azov Sea. As of the end of the 10th of July of 2026, the sources reported that more than 45 vessels were attacked by the Ukrainian side. They were destroyed. The Russians right now are not able to do anything with them. But you know that from one side we see that the Russians right now suffer huge losses with these vessels. But from the other side, we need to understand that the Russians with this situation are trying to minimize the losses. So what is happening right now? First of all, according to the satellite picture that was published 3 days ago, the Russians have concentrated dozens of vessels in the area of Azov Sea, and probably, and according to information we have, these vessels and these tankers have oil on board, because today we start receiving first satellite pictures where we can see oil splits on the territory of Azov Sea, and these are the consequences of the Ukraine's attack. And for example, this video was also published today where we can see that the vessels were damaged badly by the armed forces of Ukraine. So what is happening right now? The thing is that the Russians are not able to remove these vessels, these tankers, from the area of the Sea of Azov in the southern direction, because if Russians began moving with these vessels in the southern direction, then these vessels with fuel would be forced to cross the Crimean Bridge. And if the Russians do this, then most likely the Ukrainians would attack these vessels while they're moving through the Crimean Bridge, which can lead to unpredictable consequences and maybe even to destruction of the Crimean Bridge itself. So that is why the Russians are not able to move further in the southern direction. At the same time, the Russians are not able to return these vessels back on the territory of ports of different towns and cities in this area, because because these vessels have fuel on board, and if they return to, let's say, the city of Taganrog or to the city of Azov, the Ukrainians could also attack them, may also attack them, and in this case these tankers with fuel would damage significantly port infrastructure of these cities. And by the way, and as you can see, according to information we have during the previous 24 hours, these ports were exactly the targets that were attacked by the Ukrainians. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos from both the cities of Taganrog and Azov, and the sources reported that the Ukrainians were attacking a port infrastructure, but these port infrastructure were empty, without fuel, without these vessels, without tankers with fuel, which means that the Russians managed to minimize the losses and destructions of these towns like Azov and Taganrog. In this video we can see a black smoke over the city of Taganrog. The sources reported that the Ukrainians attacked these tanks with fuel. Furthermore, the Ukrainians attacked the city of Azov, and as for this territory, the sources, pro-Ukrainian sources, managed to geolocate at least 4 places, 4 points that were attacked by the Ukrainians. First of all, we're talking about this object of this port facility was attacked by the Ukrainians. These fuel tanks were attacked by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians also attacked these fuel tanks, and the Ukrainians attacked fuel tanks in the southern parts of the city of Azov. And here we can see a video with the fuel tanks burning after Ukraine's attacked this territory. So as you can see, the Russians, it seems, managed to prepare themselves before this attack, and they decided that it would be much more cheaper for them to release the fleet inside of the Sea of Azov and to save both the Crimean Bridge and the port infrastructure of the cities and towns along the shore of the Azov Sea. So this is the situation. Furthermore, we had reports that the Russians were trying to use aviation as air defense forces, but when talking about hundreds of drones launched by Russians, I believe that using 5 or 10 aircrafts is a very, very difficult task to destroy these hundreds of drones flying in the area of the Sea of Azov. So that is why, as of now, it is very difficult to find a real cheap solution how to bring down drones. And it seems that the Russians, as of the end of the 10th of July of 2026, still don't have this solution. Now let's move further, and now everybody understand that most likely due to this situation through the southern regions of Russia, with these objects of energy infrastructure vessels and the cities of Taganrog and Azov, the Russians will retaliate. And I would like to remind you that several days ago the United States of America notified Ukraine that the Russians would attack Ukraine within the next 72 hours. And when talking about these 72 hours, they expire during this upcoming night between the 10th and 11th of July of 2026. So most likely tonight we should wait for the massive attack from the Russian side. And according to information we have, the Ukrainians have already received missiles, PAK-3 interceptors from Poland. Poland provided just 5 missiles of this type. Furthermore, according to information we have, Zelensky said that Ukraine will receive PAK-3 interceptors for Patriot air defense systems from the United States in the coming days. So most likely, due to the fact that Zelensky has already stated about this, we believe that the missiles are already on the territory of Ukraine. So Ukrainians would try to reduce the retaliation from the Russian side, but let's wait and see how the things are going to develop. Of course, the Ukrainians can use aircrafts for these purposes, and if you remember, for example, during the NATO summit, Trump proposed US airspace control over the post-war Ukraine, combat aviation expansion on the horizon, but very, very far horizon. During the NATO summit, if you remember, Donald Trump stated that the United States is ready to close Ukrainian airspace if necessary, following a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. One possible scenario involves strengthening the aviation component. Ukraine could receive additional aircraft, while American pilots may be deployed to Poland or other other NATO countries, but the key takeaway is this: Ukraine's combat aviation fleet is likely to expand significantly through 2027 and later. Against this backdrop, it's worth recalling a recent incident where Geran 4 drones destroyed 3 MiG-29s in a single strike, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of ground-based aircraft as Ukraine prepares for a potential air power buildup. So this is the situation. As of now, the Ukrainians need aircrafts, they need Patriot Pack 3 interceptors. As for aircrafts, most likely the Ukrainians will intensify the use of this type of air defense forces, but only through 2027 and maybe later. Now let's talk about the Russian attack. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates on this matter, and probably the most important one is that the Russians, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, attacked objects of energy infrastructure. We are talking about oil bases, gas stations through the Kiev region, and we received a video on this matter, and according to information we have, the Russians attacked these oil base, and lots of videos were published on this matter. In this video we can see the oil base right after the Russians attacked this territory. We can see a very big black smoke over this object of energy infrastructure. Here we have more smokes through this object of energy infrastructure, which means that these facilities and these oil tanks were damaged badly. Here we have the same black smoke over this object, but from another angle. So which means, and most likely the Russians will intensify their strikes through the Kiev region with the purpose to create a fuel crisis. As of the previous stages of the fuel war, the Russians created a fuel crisis through the regions like Chernigov, Sumy, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Kherson, Nikolaev, maybe Poltava. Now the Russians slowly but step by step are moving further in the direction of the central part of Ukraine, and most likely the Russians are going to start with the city of Kyiv. The Russians are trying to achieve at least two goals at the same time. They want to create a fuel crisis first of all, and they want to create a political crisis on the territory of Ukraine as well. Now let's move further and let's talk about the situation on the ground. We have lots of very interesting updates, and first let's talk about the northern directions. During the previous 24 hours, the group of forces north stated, and this information was also confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources, that the Russians suddenly began advancing from the area of the border between Ukraine and the Russian Federation deep inside of the Sumy forest. The group of forces north stated that first Russia's groups were recorded through the village of Magritsa, which means that the Russians, using sabotage and reconnaissance groups, entered the village and began fighting with the Ukrainians. Furthermore, pro-Ukrainian sources and pro-Russian sources confirm that the Russians also began advancing between along the river of Rybitsa. So this is the river of Rybitsa, and it seems that the Russians right now are trying to establish complete control over the territory to the east of the river. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Kharkiv direction. As we discussed during the previous video, the Russians destroyed another gas station on the territory of the city of Kharkiv, and this video was published today. So this gas station and then the gas station was destroyed. According to information we have, the Russians continue advancing in the area of Lipets on the Ukrainian side of the Slavyansk Zaporizhzhia. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 9th of July and this is the end of the 10th of July. So it seems that the Russians right now are trying to improve their positions further and to continue advancing further in the direction of this big forest of Veliki Prokhody, Male Prokhody, with the purpose to enter these territories, these big forests, and then from these positions to establish better control over the city of Kharkiv itself with FPV drones. So the city of Kharkiv is surrounded with a significant number of forests, and the Russians are trying to enter every single one with the purpose to dig in deeper before winter and autumn comes. As for the northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region, the Russian offensive operation in this area is gaining momentum. The Ukrainians, according to information we have, began moving forces in this direction with the purpose to stabilize the situation. During the previous 24 hours, lots of attacks and explosions were recorded. The Russians continue bombing and attacking temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russians continue attacking logistics and bridges along the rivers, and the most important thing is that the Russians began outflanking the settlement of Bilogorivka from the north and from the northeast, and this information was confirmed by pro-Russian sources and by pro-Ukrainian mappers. The Russians began battle for the most northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region. We're talking about this corner. In coming days, we may see lots of changes in this area, and if Russians are able to take on the complete control of these territories, the Russians will enter an operational space with the purpose to move further in the direction of the settlement of Shevchenka. But the Russian offensive operation towards the settlement of Shevchenka would be carried out from several directions, and one of the directions is the eastern direction from the city of Kupiansk and the Kupiansk agglomeration. As for the previous 24 hours, small changes were recorded through the central part of the settlement of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. The Russians continue offensive. Another important area is the southern parts of the Borovo pockets. These days, we don't have updates about the situation in this area, but we have just small pieces of the puzzle of the Borovo pocket, southern Borovo pocket. And according to information we have currently, one of the biggest and probably greatest battles are taking place through this territory. The Ukrainians are trying to hold this Borovo pocket, and the Russians are trying to establish complete control over the territory. And we see that both the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to keep the information about this battle in secret, but it most likely won't be able to do this for a very long period of time. This is a very important territory, and the Russians are trying to take under complete control everything along the river Oskol, and the Ukrainians understand that this is a vital question for them, because if Russians, as a result of offensive operation, are able to establish complete control over the river Oskol, over the entire river Oskol from the north to the south, the Russians would be able to establish a big control over the entire river, and this will allow the Russians to release lots of troopers that could be used later to intensify the offensive operation through the city of Liman in the direction of the city of Slavyansk. Furthermore, from these positions, the Russians may try to cross the river of Oskol with the purpose, and the river of Seversky Donetsk with the purpose to attack the Slavyansk agglomeration from behind. Furthermore, from these positions, the Russians may try to create a buffer zone between the river of Oskol itself and the central part of the Kharkiv region with the purpose to get as close as possible to the city of Kharkiv from the south and from the southeast. Once again, currently there are very heavy clashes for this territory, but for some reason both the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to keep this information a secret. Just several sources confirm that there are very heavy clashes, and pro-Russian sources are saying that the situation is a very difficult one, but the Russians are in defense and the Ukrainians are trying to counterattack with the purpose maybe even to release the city of Liman. Now let's talk about the Slavyansk and Druzhkovka agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very important updates. First of all, the Russians destroyed the bridge to the west of the city of Slavyansk. This one, the bridge between the villages of Cherkasskoye and Alexandrovka. So we see that Ukraine's logistics in this area continue deteriorating. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians published more videos of how they were attacking gas stations through the city of Slavyansk and through the city of Kramatorsk. In this video we can see a gas station hit by Russians. In these videos we can see dozens of gas stations destroyed as a result of the Russian attack. So as of the previous 24 hours and as of these days, the Russians began actively destroying Ukraine's logistics and gas stations to the east of this red line. So everything in this area what is connected with fuel, with logistics, the Russians began destroying going. When Russians finish this situation, the Russians will move further the focus towards the settlements, to the arc of the settlements of Dobropolye and Izum. And this is the next target of Russians, to destroy every single gas station between the cities of Izum and Dobropolye. This will create no fuel or no gas station gap between the mainland and the main battle of the Donbas arc operation. And if it happens, we need to understand that everything that enters this territory would be a one-way ticket without any chances to evacuate vehicles. And this is a very important situation, because at the same time we see that the Russians managed to save their gas stations and their logistics to the east of the Slavyansk Druzhkovka agglomeration. And this situation means that the battle for Druzhkovka Slavyansk agglomeration may start much faster than anyone expected. And the most important, that is, this battle could be finished also much faster than Zelensky believes. As for the current situation, right now the Russians are tasked to maintain the lines at the same time synchronously along the entire line of combat contact, starting from the southwest of the city of Druzhkovka and ending with the northwestern parts of the city of Slavyansk. The Russians are moving slowly but along the entire line of combat contact, tightening the noose every single day. As of the current situation, the Russians are trying to cut the pocket between the cities of Konstantinovka and Chasiv Yar, and as you can see, changes were recorded during the previous 24 hours, and these changes were made based on this video published by pro-Ukrainian sources, where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians that were trying to cut the pocket and to encircle Ukrainians in this small cauldron. Another important video was published through the northern parts of the city of Konstantinovka. Here we have a video. The Russians raised the Russian flag through the most northern parts of the city of Konstantinovka. This video, this is archived video according to pro-Russian sources, but according to geolocations, this is the first time when the flag was raised through the northern parts of the city, and this is the most northern flag through the city, which means that the Russians have strong control over this territory as well. As of the end of the 10th of July of 2026, we still have a lot of sources saying that the city of Konstantinovka remains under complete and solid control of the armed forces of Ukraine, but it seems that the situation is not like this. As for the Dobropolye direction, the Russian major offensive operation intensifies. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of updates that the Russians improved their positions through the Dobropolye direction. This is a very important direction, and it seems that the Russians decided to establish complete control over the city of Dobropolye even earlier than the end of the battle for the Slavyansk Konstantinovka agglomeration, as the president of the Russian Federation stated several days ago that if Ukrainians lose control over this defense line between Dobropolye and Sergeyevka, then the Russians will answer the territory without solid defense from the armed forces of Ukraine. Basically, the Russians will face no resistance if they continue moving further in the northwestern direction, because the distance between the city of Dobropolye and the next more or less fortified area, the settlement of Lazova, is around 70 kilometers, and there is almost no villages, no big towns or big villages between these two cities, which means that the Russians would be able to move through these small villages with less resistance from the Ukrainian side, and this is the situation that the Ukrainians understand most of all. Further to the west, we have more gas stations destroyed between the cities of Dnipro and Pavlograd, and during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were bombing the city of Zaporizhzhia significantly. We received lots of videos, lots of gas stations, first of all, were destroyed. In this video, we can see the consequences of the Russian attack. The gas station through the eastern parts of the city was destroyed. Later, we received these pictures where we can see another logistic hub with hundreds of trucks destroyed by Russians, and just several hours ago the Russians attacked the central part of the city of Zaporizhzhia, and we have lots of pictures and videos on this matter. The Russians reported that the central recruit office of the armed forces of Ukraine was destroyed in the central part of the city of Zaporizhzhia, and these are the consequences of attack. As you can see, this small block was reduced to ruins. Once again, this is, according to pro-Russian sources, the local recruit center of the armed forces of Ukraine. As for the Odesa direction, we discussed in the beginning of the video, the Russians several minutes ago attacked the city of Odesa. Probably the Ukrainians were preparing themselves before the beginning of another massive attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, and as you can see, the Russians were trying to prevent this attack. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.